when your back's against the wall, when you have nothing, you also have nothing to lose. And it's imperative to pick yourself back up and have a fucking plan.
The ability to say no, though, is predicated on years of hard work before that. And that's what a lot of people forget.
10 years ago, my magic number was $100 million. I just want to fuck shit up, make money, and change the world.
So welcome to the next episode of the Entrepreneurial Excellence Podcast. I have someone pretty unique and different with me today, David Kram, who is the founder of Springleaf Capital, which is a cannabis advisory and consulting firm for everything related to essentially finance, M&A, those sorts of things in the cannabis industry. But you're a great example, David, and why I wanted you on the show today is you're this fantastic example of there's so many different ways to be an entrepreneur. There's so many different types of entrepreneurs, cannabis ones, you starting your own advisory firm, you name it. And for me, that's just really exciting to learn from and frankly be inspired by. So thank you so much for being
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored. This is actually my first podcast. So this is great.
Well, this is first probably of many, because I know you have many good things in life planned, and frankly, you've tended to make your dreams a reality. So my guess is you have much more to come. Which actually, on that note, walk me through like what drives you, and what are you driving towards?
That's a great question. What drives me is success, right? And it's always been instilled in me since a very young age that I've always just wanted to be successful. I wanted to excel at pretty much everything that I've done. And it certainly started before my entrepreneurial journey. It actually probably started when I was in middle school or high school, where I started getting involved in extracurriculars, right? After school sports and, honor societies and clubs. I've just always wanted to be successful, like with anything that I put my mind to. And I always tell people that I think I peaked in high school because I was so involved in so many things. I was like president of this honor society. I was doing three sports. I was working a job. I got, straight A's, well above a 4.0 GPA. And I just have always prided myself on excellence. And it's always just doing the best that you can, no matter what you put your mind to. And that's definitely stayed with me throughout high school and college. And now in my entrepreneurial years, if I dream it, I can achieve it. And no matter what it is, whether it's starting a company or launching an advisory, firm, or even helping out other folks with their businesses or being a mentor, I've just always wanted to be successful at it. And I think that's what drives me the most.
How do you define, so successful, you kind of hinted at it, but like, how do you define success, right? So success is a lot of different definitions for people, right? It could be financial success. It could be getting good grades. It could be winning the playoffs for your whole team, whatever. Like, how do you define it? And maybe specifically, how do you define it today for yourself as an entrepreneur? Like, what is your definition of success, and how will you know you've achieved it?
I would tell you my definition of success has kind of evolved over the years. If we wound back to about 10 years ago when you and I met, my success was very financial. Okay. It was very singular in nature. It's that David wanted to be rich. Okay. I want to achieve a certain level of financial freedom, and that manifested itself in a certain level of net worth. And I've kind of always told myself for the last 10 years, I won't think I'm successful until I hit my magic number. And I'll be very vocal with you. 10 years ago, my magic number was $100 million. All right. For some people, they would never even know what that amount of money would even look like. But that's always the number that I've always had in my head. And looking back as I've matured and as I've gotten more into the working world, it's like that thinking has kind of evolved a little bit in terms of it's no longer singular in terms of 100 million. Maybe my number now is a billion, but it's my definition of success now is much more than just financial, right? And as I've gotten older, I've definitely realized as I've kind of, gotten into more success, especially recently, it's, happiness is also pretty important, right? It's not just about having fuck you money, right? It's about being able to work with good people that you respect, people that value you. And ultimately, are you doing what you're actually happy with, right? Are you working with great people? Are you building products or services, or, helping clients that you're excited about, that you actually, like waking up every single day and doing? Or is it just about the money, right? And this is something that, quite honestly, that I've struggled with for the last few years is, am I aiming for some kind of financial pinnacle in my career, like some level of, net worth? And will I only be successful if I reach it? Or, can I be happy just, being happy and waking up every day, doing what I love and working with amazing people? Or does it really have to be a number? And I've definitely struggled with this, but, I've kind of evolved in my thinking. It's success is both financial, but it's also personal, right? It's also happiness. It's also gratitude. And it's, just being satisfied.
Is there a level of like inverse correlation, do you think? Especially I'm sort of asking this in the point of you're down in LA, and I don't want to go too far down that tangent just yet, but you're down in LA. And is there an inverse correlation where the more kind of fuck you money that you have, the more hangers on you might get? And in some ways, like it might be an inverse correlation between happiness, where it's like, hey, like better to be rich, completely anonymous, maybe, and be able then to work with great people, build great things, and do it in a quiet, sort of careful way, but also maybe the culture that you're in down in LA, or just the culture, frankly, for a lot of wealthy people, it tends to be more showy. And then does having more wealth lead to that level of overall success financially and personally, happiness wise, or does it hurt it potentially?
Yeah, no, you bring up a very good point. And I can certainly comment a little bit personally, but I can also comment anecdotally with a lot of my friends that I know that quite transparently are much more successful than I am. I've seen, and I've been down in LA for five years now. I've seen it all. And I would definitely tell you that there is an inverse correlation between wealth and kind of happiness. And I know a few billionaires down here, and, I see, especially talking about hanger-ons, I've seen who tries to surround themselves with them. And there is definitely a inverse correlation between having a lot of fuck you money, being able to spend it, but also having a lot of people that just have their hand out, right? Completely moralist. Like they don't even care. There are a lot of rich people in LA, and there's a lot of rich people that like to throw parties, and there's a lot of rich people that are socially connected, right? And you have a kind of a huge swath of people that like to ride on their, coattails. And I'm, as I've gotten into recent successes, I'm starting to get a taste of this. People obviously love being around successful people. That's shouldn't be surprising to anyone. But in a city like LA, where there's just so much success and so much excess, and I think that's the biggest difference between LA and other cities like San Francisco or New York. LA is obviously very showy, right? You can have a guy with $100 million in LA versus someone with $100 million in SF, but they show it differently. The guy in SF is, in a 3-bedroom townhouse, not driving a Lamborghini, not throwing ragers every weekend, probably living somewhat within his means. A guy with $100 million in LA is taking huge swings for the fences. He's got a $50 million house in the West Hollywood Hills. He throws parties with 500, 20 somethings every weekend. And, it kind of manifests differently. And that certainly shouldn't be surprising to anyone. But I've definitely had the benefit of talking with some of these, very successful people that are kind of in this ecosystem. And two of them I've actually asked them, like, as you've kind of, gone and scaled your net worth, for lack of a better phrase, in your career, are you happier, right? Like when you pass 10 million, when you pass 20 million, when you pass 100 million, I even talked to someone who passed $500 million recently, and I can't even fathom that amount of money. And quite honestly, I was very, very surprised by the answer, because the answer was no. The answer was, well, now everyone seems to come after me for my money, whether directly or indirectly. It's like, now everyone needs something. And when people, hey, can you hang out? Do you want to grab dinner? You want to grab lunch? Let's, have a meeting. They were essentially telling me, more and more people are just coming out of the woodwork. Hey, we went to high school together. Hey, we went to college together. How you've been the last 20 years? But it's always nefarious intentions. It's always invest in my company, support my business, do this. It's like, what can I get from you? And as I kind of take a step back myself, I obviously aspire to, be more successful as I get older. One thing is very important is to be very cognizant of who you surround yourself with, because not everyone is actually your friend for the right reasons.
So then what do you think, what do you think all those, the folks you're talking about, and yourself included, how do you redefine, or what do you define what's getting a success? I mean, like, because there's still something driving you, right? So you could say, look, I want to be driven towards happiness. And you could say, fuck all, I'm getting rid of my entire business. I'm going to go be a yogi, sit on a cliff and like meditate all day long. But obviously you're not doing that. I mean, we're recording, no one would know, but like, I know we're recording from your beautiful place in the Hollywood Hills. Like that's amazing. Those people like that, people, we were talking about this right before the call, right? People want to come to your house and like do TikTok videos from your like your pool. Like that sounds amazing to a lot of people. And you obviously are pushing towards that part of your life, but it sounds like there's a dichotomy between that. So how do you work that out yourself? Because also your clients hire you because you're a bruiser and a baller, and you're going to get them the highest deal and the highest price because you are driven for that next level of success. Like, what does then that really look like for you? Like, how do you still redefine that or think through what that means?
Yeah, I think I'm constantly redefining success, and I think it's a very iterative process. And with each deal, with each new client, with each new minor win that I celebrate, whether it's, moving into a new place, whether it's getting a new car, whether it's, trying out a new really expensive restaurant that I've never been to, or going on that special trip that I've dreamed about for 3 to 4 years. The one constant is, that I realize is success begets success, right? People want to work with you because they see you as being successful, right? Especially with where I sit in the client service business. Like, if I'm tasked to represent as an agent or an advisor, a company in a sale for 10, 20, 30, 50, $100 million, I have to, conduct myself in a certain way. I have to present in a certain way. And quite honestly, I have to be a certain way. I have to be successful because perception is reality. If I'm not successful and if I don't appear successful, how can a CEO of the company expect me to sell their company for the maximum dollar value if I'm not successful myself? Because indirectly, my client's success is my success. I mean, my compensation is directly tied to it. So if I'm successful as an advisor in the M&A world and I'm out there representing companies and selling companies successfully, I should be successful, right? And there's a direct correlation to that. But even if I wasn't, I still have to appear as such. So to answer your question, I'm constantly redefining success, and I think my latest thinking is I'm definitely on a pursuit to happiness. I just question what happiness means for me, and I have a definition today. Quite frankly, my definition of happiness could differ at the end of this year, and it's quite certainly will differ by next year or even 10 years from now. But all I can do is strive for what my most current definition of happiness is, and try to achieve that. And if I keep doing that, and as that definition changes over time, I can't help but constantly try to strive for that and hopefully achieve, the summit, which would be success and happiness at some point. And then maybe when I reach that place in my life, maybe that's retirement, maybe that's pivoting to doing something completely differently. Maybe that's getting rid of the house, getting rid of the cars, getting rid of the friends, moving to Bali and Costa Rica and living off the fat of land for the rest of my days. I don't really know what that looks like, but the world is definitely anyone's oyster and the sky's the limit. So who knows what the future holds?
So that's actually a perfect segue into the next question I had for you, which is walking back 10 years, 15 years or so ago, early on, David Kram's a nobody. He doesn't quite know what he wants to do. He hasn't had success, so he really has got to fake it. Maybe you had the idea the world's my oyster. How do you decide, and I'm asking this question for all those early entrepreneurs in their career journeys too. What are the things that you said, like, I want to go do X and here's how I'm going to go fake it until I make it and show off that success and go in a direction that makes sense for me. How did you think through that? What pushed you to enable, one step in front of the next that compounded on itself to get you to the point where you have a house in the Hollywood Hills now?
Great question. It's literally, you hit the nail on the head, one foot in front of another. And it wasn't just 10 years ago. I mean, quite frankly, I think I was a nobody for a long time. All right. There were many times in my life where I was almost broke. I wasn't always successful. And if you ask anyone that has either tasted a recent success or is successful today by whatever their measure is, if they're actually being honest, then they will tell you that, well, I wasn't always successful. I wasn't born this way. Unless you're a trust fund baby, you're not born a multimillionaire. And I'm not a trust fund baby. I'm completely self-made. So, there was certainly a time where I literally had nothing. There was many times in my life where I've had nothing. And this is definitely in the past, decade. And I think the most important thing is you have to have a plan, right? You can't just sit on the couch, struggle to get out of bed. You can't be depressed. Oh, I have nothing. I have nothing going for me. I have no clients. I don't know what kind of business I want to start. Nobody's paying me money. No one's paying attention to me. I'm not the hottest dude at the bar. I'm not picking up the ladies. Like, there's a time in every entrepreneurial's journey where they're down and out, or at least they feel that way. And it's imperative to pick yourself back up and have a fucking plan, right? You don't have to have an earth-shattering idea for the next Facebook or Microsoft or Google or TikTok, but you have to have a clear vision of what do you want to do, right? When your back's against the wall, when you have nothing, you also have nothing to lose. And you could assume a higher level of risk. And that's where I felt I was, a few times, is my back was against the wall. I was struggling to make rent. I was consulting for a couple companies, 2 of which didn't pay me. Was barely making enough to live. This is back in my SF days. And I was kind of lost. I quite honestly didn't know what to do. Like, do I start my own business? Do I help other people start businesses? Like, do I, go back to my roots, which is I'm a finance guy, right? So I was kind of like, well, what do I do? And I was smoking a joint one night and I had a pen and a piece of paper. And I was like, you know what, David, I'm going to write a plan. I'm going to write a plan down, literally pen and paper, old school style. My goals, how I'm going to get there, right? And I'm definitely not going to regurgitate it step by step, but it was so rudimentary. It's like, it started with, get one client that will pay me X. All right. And once I secure that one client that'll pay me X, and most people dream big and they're like, I want to make $500 million. And I want to go IPO and all this stuff. But you really got to start small, and everything big starts with very humble, beginnings. And I really just wanted to secure my first client that would help me get to my next milestone. And my next milestone was to pay my rent. It wasn't to make $1 million. It was literally to pay my rent to afford to live in an expensive city like San Francisco. All right. And the rest was history from there. It's like my singular goal was get a client, get a company that valued me enough to pay me money on my own.
Do you have this like plan frame somewhere? You should have like,
I should probably go find it. Yeah, there's probably some scrabble somewhere on some piece of paper in some box, but I would definitely need to go find that. But, the one thing I would tell any budding entrepreneur is have a plan, have a strategy. And that plan and that strategy is not anyone else's plan or strategy except yours. And it could be anything, literally. It could be as small as getting one client to pay you $3,000 a month to afford rent. It could be as large as, starting at the next blockbuster company, right? But my number one piece of advice is don't think too big, right? Every big company, every big idea, whether it's your company or a client's company or a friend's company, or whether you're an employee or a self-made entrepreneur, you kind of have to get that 0 to 1 locked in early. It's how do we start, right? One foot in front of another, and you got to break it down, right? It's like, where do you start? How do you get your first client? How do you build your MVP product, right? You want to create the next TikTok, but what is it you're actually creating? Like, what is that minimum viable product that'll demonstrate to not only yourself, but to a prospective investor that you actually know what you're doing, that you're headed in the right direction, that you don't need to pivot to something else, that you're actually solving a problem that someone will use or someone else will pay for.
Is there a level of like being like super focused too? Like, how much do you think, especially early in your career, you were kind of jumping around versus saying, like, I'm going to go in this direction. And maybe it's still, even if the different product might be different, but like staying, and I'm kind of hinting at like my thesis, at least, is that like people should have a level of conviction to some extent. Like for me, like I've done a lot of different startups, but they've all been in the generally like tech space. And so like I've been here long enough at this point that I have a lot of relationships that I've built and people I know and people I can call on. And like I talk to young people, they're like, wait, that person, that person, that person. I'm like, yeah, dude, I fucking stuck around. Like I just stuck around and kept plodding away. And it didn't mean that like every idea I had was going to explode and get huge, but I just stuck around and so many people bounced. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why are you jumping out? Like, it's supposed to be hard, but like, what did you find for yourself where you were just like, I'm just going to keep with it? And also like, why the cannabis industry? Like, how did you get into that?
I left banking in about 2013 time period. I was in San Francisco. I was doing middle market M&A, working with technology companies. I was an analyst. I was, my nose was in a financial model every single day. I was in spreadsheets. I was doing research. I was doing kind of the remedial work. And quite honestly, I wasn't very good at it. And I didn't like doing it. And, this kind of begs the question of, if you don't like doing something, no matter how much it pays you, do something else. Right. And that was kind of my impetus to do something else. Right. In banking, the goal is you go analyst, associate, you go VP, you go to business school, right? You come back as an MD, et cetera. And I wasn't a fan of the hierarchy at all. In fact, I'm not to this day. I'm very much not a fan of the corporate ladder. This is kind of my reasoning for going out on my own is, you know, looking back, I had a problem with authority. And quite honestly, I still have a problem with authority. And sometimes when you have a problem with authority, maybe you should be your own boss, right? And that was my big light bulb moment. It's like, I was smoking a joint one day and I was like, hey, you hate your job. You don't like getting up every day, working for someone who you don't respect and who doesn't respect you. No matter how much money I was making, like I wasn't happy. I literally was not. So how I got into cannabis was really randomly. I left banking, didn't know what I was doing, right? I had this financial skill set. I came from tech. I wanted something unique, maybe something a little different, maybe something that was a little bit more uncharted, right? Maybe a new industry. And I was kind of searching for what that was. And I was like toying around with, new types of tech and consumer, et cetera. And one day a friend invited me to a cannabis networking event. All right. In San Francisco. I didn't know what a cannabis networking event was. I consumed cannabis, but like I didn't.
Right, I was gonna say, you're like, I like cannabis, so sure, I'll go to a party event to this.
I like cannabis. I was like, is this like a big giant sesh where everyone gets in a room and smokes a lot of weed and gets high and shares ghost stories? Or was this more business oriented? Quite honestly, I didn't know, but I was curious. So I went, and it was in a very small, there was probably like 20, 25 people there. There were a lot of people that, didn't really look like me, right? I just come from a very, suit-oriented job, Wall Street, right? I was finance. I like showed up in like a suit and tie. I didn't show up to this event in a suit and tie, thank God, because everyone was dressed down. Very much hoodies, very much casual. And everyone is essentially standing around in a circle inside a building, passing around joints and talking about weed. And this was very eye-opening to me because I had never gone to something like this. There was just a bunch of fucking stoners basically in a room talking about cannabis and how that their strains are better than the next, or how one wanted to launch a delivery service and one had a dispensary that just opened and they were really excited about their companies, but they were talking about, well, how do I scale? How do I get bigger, right? How do I sell more weed, move more pounds, right? And here comes David, innocent little David, coming from a finance background. And I was like, oh, I was kind of shy and quiet at first, which is not like me at all. And you definitely know that. I'm very loud and I like to command the room, but I was taking it in. I was like, what is going on here? You had all these people that, grew really good weed. I could attest to that. I was smoking it. But they didn't understand finance at all. And I started to, ask questions because I'm a finance guy. I was like, oh, so, how much money have you put in this business? Like, what are your revenues? Like, are you generating a profit? And judging from their answers, like some of them didn't even know what a profit really meant, right? And I was trying to walk them through essentially like what their balance sheet could look like or their P&L. And it was very foreign to them. So it was a light bulb moment that went off within me. It was like, okay, so I have this financial acumen and this, skill set. Here's an industry that is very budding and growing and nascent. Maybe there's a way to parlay my financial skill set and help entrepreneurs in this industry. Or maybe I should just be one myself. And that was kind of how I got into the space.
That's crazy. And so I want to keep talking to you like what that space looks like, but I want to go back to actually a point you made that was really fascinating to me, which is like your sort of disdain for authority. And, now you've worked with a huge number of different founders. I mean, that's your business, is essentially advising founders on selling their successful businesses. Do you think disdain for authority or something else is one of like, what is a defining hallmark of the best and most quote unquote successful entrepreneurs you've worked with?
Great question. It probably has something to do with the disdain for authority. And it also just has to do with hubris and a desire to fuck shit up and change the world and do whatever you put your mind to. And certainly the best entrepreneurs that I've worked with, especially in the cannabis space, which I've been so active in, don't seem to give a shit about anyone else. Don't seem to give a shit about what anyone else thinks about their business model, their go-to-market strategy. They have a high level of conviction in what they're doing, right? For right or wrong, right? A few of them have been, misleading others, especially investors, in terms of, uses of funds and how they're going about businesses. But one thing I'm not going to knock is their conviction, right? They are very consistent in what they're doing, how they're going about it, how they're going to market, how they're going to make money, how they're going to exit. And it's this high degree of conviction that it really convinces, guys like me to advise them, investors to come in and back them, customers, vendors, partners, channel, everyone to do business with them. So I would say the number one attribute of the most successful companies that I've certainly worked with is just have a high degree of conviction in what you're doing. And this obviously, we've definitely seen this before. Case in point, Adam Newman at WeWork and a host of others. Have a high degree of conviction of what you're doing. Present yourself. Be very confident to your audience. Be very consistent. And again, for right or wrong, whether you have morals or not, that certainly is going to go a long way. It's going to get you much more closer to tasting success.
Do you think those folks, and maybe include yourself in this, is that high degree of conviction is in many cases actually also bullshitting yourself, right? You're kind of convincing yourself, like, who knows, was Adam Newman lying to people, or did he legitimately believe his own bullshit? I don't know. Hard to know, probably, but did it matter in some ways? Maybe it didn't. He walked away with a few $100 million, and it's, there were sophisticated investors on the other side of that transaction buying his shares. So did it matter?
It doesn't matter. And he's just one example. I mean, I've kind of seen this manifested in a few of my clients. Like, a lot of people believe their own bullshit. And I quite frankly can believe that also, because I believe my own bullshit, right? Especially, historically. It's like if you're constantly going about your day and, you're pitching investors, you're pitching partners, and you portray this vision for the future, right? How you see it, how you see your business evolving in the marketplace. You say that over and over again, you might as well preach it into existence, because it's going to be true, at least in your own mind. You're going to believe your own bullshit, right? And a lot of times it's like, that might be that little nugget of information, that little piece of extra icing on the cake that actually gets you across the finish line to success. Maybe that's the one thing that gets you that investor check. Maybe it's the one thing that secures that partnership. The journey of entrepreneurship, I think that serves a part. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your vision to a fault. Whether you're right or wrong, whether you have a God complex and you think you're going to completely change the face of the earth or not, a lot of times you have to believe and think that way. And that's how a lot of entrepreneurs do think. And there's a lot of crazy ones out there. And I think part of entrepreneurship is kind of celebrating the folks with God complexes, celebrating the visionaries, the thinkers, the change makers, the troublemakers, the people that just want to break all the rules and think so drastically differently that they just want to fuck shit up and make money and change the world and have it look exactly how they want it to look. And that's part of the beauty of entrepreneurship. And that's part of the reason why we celebrate it.
So you sound like a modern day Steve Jobs with some of the stuff you're saying there. Do you think that are there certain skill sets? So walk me through the skill sets that you think are really important for the really most successful in sort of excellent entrepreneurs that you've worked with, or yourself included, right? Okay, well, sure, you need to bullshit yourself, your customers, everybody else, because you just have to believe that something different should exist in the world. But what are the skill sets that enable you to do that? Is it being able to tell a story? Is it being smarter than everyone else? Is it working harder than everyone else? Is it hiring better than everyone else? Like, you name it. There's a ton of different skills and actions that go into success. What are those? How would you rank order those, prioritize them, and say, like, these are the most important ones that you've seen the most successful people have?
Two things: storytelling and people. Those are the two things that I think are definitely the top things for me. Is and I would rank them number one: storytelling. Whether you're out raising money, which obviously is all about storytelling, or even trying to secure your first customer, your first partner, your first investor, it's all about telling a story, right? Entrepreneurship is all storytelling. And I think the better you are at telling a story, the more convincing you are and telling everyone else what it is you're doing and why it's going to work, right? You have to tell a story, right? And a lot of people's stories are rooted personally in their own personal stories and kind of how they got to, tackling this one particular problem, or why they came up with this random idea. And it's stories create credibility, right? The better story you have, the higher credibility you have, the closer you are to reaching your next milestone, customer, partner, vendor, or exit, right? And the number two thing is, well, you got to be good with people. You got to have people that tell a story too.
So hold on, before we get to people, I want to go back to storytelling for a little bit more, which is like, what are elements of story? When you think about your own story that you're telling, right? For yourself, for your firm, what are the elements that you're like, I need to always make sure I hit on? Or even if you probably don't think of it that way because it's probably just natural to you now, but break it down. Like what is the story? Maybe even give us the story. Like tell us the story right now. Like how would you give us a story for Springleaf Capital? What is that story? Pretend I'm a potential client or another party on the other side who you're negotiating with. Like what is the story you're telling? You're like, this is why you should work with me in my firm. Like what are the elements that go into it, and maybe convince us. I don't have a cannabis company, so I'm not your customer, but tell, give the audience an idea of what would it look like to be sold by David Kram.
Certainly I'm a master. I think I learned every single day how to sell. But in terms of crafting my own story, it's all rooted in my experience. So, whether you're a cannabis client or a consumer or a tech company, it really doesn't matter. It's why should you work with me, right? And my story is, I started Springleaf Capital because I noticed a gap in the marketplace in terms of entrepreneurs needing finance help. And I have a financial skill set, and I wanted to bring that to the cannabis ecosystem based on my experience in tech and my schooling. And I wanted to help entrepreneurs. And the number one reason why people should work with me is because I've now been doing this almost 10 years, and I've seen so many companies fail and do it wrong. And I've learned iteratively from all of their experiences. I've helped now so many entrepreneurs, and not all of them have been successful, right? And I think it's really important because, if you work with an advisor that has only seen success and has only had successes, I don't think you're equipped enough for an industry, especially like cannabis, which is so dynamic, so fast moving, and has a lot of pitfalls and roadblocks. If you're going to advise an entrepreneur, you want to work with someone that's been in the trenches, that has worked with countless entrepreneurs that have had successes, but also have had a lot of failures, so that you can glean all of those insights and all of those failures on future clients and help them avoid all those issues, which are often extraordinarily costly. So the story of my firm is I've worked now with, probably 50 plus entrepreneurs in multiple states, multiple areas of the, supply chain. I've worked with growers. I've worked with processors. I've worked with brands. I've worked with delivery services. I've worked with POS systems, payments companies, every part of the supply chain and the entire ecosystem that is cannabis. And you could apply this to technology too. Given my experience, I've seen it all. I've seen what works and, more importantly, what doesn't. I've worked with the companies that, produce the product, sell the product, distribute the product, and I know the pitfalls, I know the problems, I know the issues. And because I've been through all of these experiences, I can provide the best possible actionable advice to any entrepreneur that can get them closer to success in a much faster time.
And what does that look like when you think through, and like, if you kind of maybe a good segue into, and I want to come back to people still, but dig into a little bit, what does good deal making look like? Like not just in the cannabis industry, but maybe just in deals in general. If you're doing M&A, you're a founder, thinking about selling your business, what are key points for success and key failure points that also potentially exist too, where you're gonna fuck up this deal, or walk us through some of your biggest deals where you're like shit, like we bullshitted our way to getting a 10x higher return for our customer, like things like that. Like how did those things happen? And then also I'm sure there are ones where like you bullshitted too hard and the deal fell apart, and then the company went out of business 2 years later and the person's like, fuck, I had a chance at making some real money.
Yeah, a lot of the companies that I sell, we sell based on multiples of revenue or cash flow, right? So in terms of success, you sell a company for a multiple of revenue, or you sell a company for a multiple of EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amort. So, when I go about selling a company, I mean, my biggest contributing factors to success in helping my companies be successful and selling them for the maximum dollar value is market knowledge and insight. What are companies historically trading for? What are they bought for? What are they sold for? Right? So it's going into the market with knowledge. Never go into an M&A process or, with a goal of selling your company without knowledge of the market. We call it in banking precedent transactions, right? companies that look similar to yours, or maybe are in your same place in the supply chain or in a particular market, what have prior companies sold for as multiples of revenue or cash flow, right? It's important to know going in, because if you don't have that data and you don't have those comps, you're not going to be smart when it comes to having those negotiations with buyers, because buyers know that level of intel, or they should, and they kind of know at least, hey, this is where these companies have been trading at. This is what other companies like mine have bought companies for. That is the now market price. So if I don't go in with that market intel, I'm going to go in and be pitching a valuation that is either not realistic on the upside or not realistic on the downside. And both of those things can be detrimental in realizing a successful outcome.
Is the assumption too, when you go into that negotiation, that the other party is also has those market comps? So at least everybody's in a somewhat similar range of like, hey, like we know what things should be generally trading at. And does that help the deal, because everyone kind of knows what you should be aiming at, and you kind of know what's a ridiculous number and not a ridiculous number? Or are people just fucking idiots about it and don't care?
Both. So I'm primarily a sell side banker, meaning I represent the sellers in sales to buyers, right? So the biggest thing, especially about cannabis, that I've noticed is there is a massive spread between bid and ask. Ask is the price that sellers want for their business. Bid is the price buyers are willing to pay for it, right? In cannabis, and again, I'm just going to comment on that. In any industry, there is a spread between bid and ask. There's always a difference in willingness and ability, and also expectation of price. A lot of times, especially in my experience with cannabis, is sellers, think their businesses are worth X. Buyers think their businesses are worth probably 20 to 50% of X. So sellers come to me saying, hey, David, I think my one dispensary is worth $10 million, right? And in the marketplace, it's not. Buyers are willing to pay maybe 3 to 5 million. So there's this huge difference in price expectation. And part of my challenge in deciding who to work with, and also how to position companies when I approach buyers, is getting rational, getting real on expectations of value. And that's the biggest thing. There's a lot of companies that come to me. They're like, David, well, I want to sell for the highest price. I'm like, all right, well, great. Well, what's your ask? Like, what is a number that you think realistically that you would walk away from your business from today? And I always say this for a reason, because it's almost my delusion barometer, right? How delusional are my own potential clients? Are they rational in their thinking in terms of market value? Or are they taking some pie in the sky number for valuation, and they just expect me to pull a rabbit out of a hat and get it for them, right? So that's my biggest struggle is if I'm taking a company to market, I'm not going to take them to market if they have this unrealistic view of valuation, because I just know in the end of the day, I'm not going to be successful.
So do you say no to those clients then? If you're like, hey, look, I'd love to work with you, but you're just completely irrational. Come back to me when you either are more rational, or you've gone to every other M&A advisor and they all tell you no too. Like what is, but I mean, I'm sure there's a level of greed that you also have. Where like, I don't want to miss out on a potential great deal, even if they're irrational. Yeah,
it's a really good question. It's a really fine line balance, because on one hand, I'm trying to build a business. I'm trying to build an advisory business, and I need more clients. I need more deals. I need more deal flow. The higher number of deals that I have, the more valuable I am as an advisor / broker in the eyes of buyers, right? So that's on one hand. On the other hand, I have a huge amount of reputational risk, as any M&A advisor banker has, right? If I'm bringing a deal to market, I'm running a formal process, you are only as good as your latest deal, right? So you have to bring a deal that is well priced, right? You can't be egregious. Like if I'm bringing something to market at 2 to 3x the market value, people are going to look at me and go, who the fuck is that David guy? Like, he clearly doesn't know his intel. He doesn't know his data. He's selling this company. It's completely overvalued. Really bad deal. I'm never going to work with him again. That's the risk, right? I have to really hone in on maintaining good relations with my buyers. And that is also about bringing good deals to them. It's not about bringing shitty deals, bad deals, or deals that are overpriced. You have to bring good deals to your, constituent of buyers, while simultaneously building up an advisory practice and making sure you have deals coming in the door every single day. So it's actually really challenging, because a lot of clients that come to me, we have to massage the valuation, right? I don't immediately dismiss clients. Number one, I definitely try to talk through things, and I always speak from data first. It's like, hey guys, you have this type of business in this market. Here are the last 3 to 4 deals that have gone off. Here's the last 3 to 4 companies to have sold. This is what they sold for. These are the multiples of what they sold for. Here's what I think I can get for you, right? And usually that's a number that is, somewhat lower than what they thought or a number they had in their head. So then it's up to them. Do they move forward with me based on the experience and the market, intel and my access to buyers that I have, or do they want to play the field? And do they want to find an M&A advisor that says to them, hey, of course, I'm going to get you your $10 million number. I'm going to get you your $20 million number. And oftentimes I do let those clients go, and they go and they, reach out to 4, 5, 6, 7 other bankers. And sometimes they come back after they've kind of, crossed their T's and dotted their I's. They're like, David, I really appreciate, you being no bullshit and being real with me. You talk straight, your numbers, you're very confident in the numbers that you think that you can fetch for my business. Now I want to move forward. I just had to, for my own peace of mind, go out there and see if there was another advisor or there was another opportunity that, could hit my number and hit my valuation for me. Right. But that's very important.
In how often is it in that space where you're actually also negotiating because you get a cut of every deal, right? And I don't know if that cut commission changes based on the potential deal, the deal size, how much you want to work with them versus by different brokers. Maybe you're more experienced, so you can charge a little bit more commission. Other people are a little bit lower price. Where's the line there? And when saying how does that all play into going back to just the idea of entrepreneurial excellence and success, where you're pricing your own product, being you and your M&A advisory? How do you make those decisions? Because you can could lower your price, get more business, have higher volume, but there's also a fine line between all of that.
To answer your question, it's all about value. It's all about self-worth, to be very honest with you. At the end of the day, the one good thing that I have going for me, to be honest, is I have a lot of deal flow. And it probably helps that I have 21,000 plus followers on LinkedIn. It probably helps that I have a very successful email newsletter. It probably helps that I go to a bunch of conferences and I just know a lot of people in the cannabis industry. So I naturally get a lot of folks coming to me with either direct deals, indirect deals. Hey, I have a buddy that wants to sell their company. So pricing is something I've always struggled with. And I kind of am struggling with this now because there is a general market price for my services, right? M&A advisory, there's a general range, usually on a percentage basis of total deal value, what bankers charge, right? And in any industry, especially, in cannabis or, consumer or tech, you're always going to get bankers or advisors that charge a higher percentage. You're always going to get ones that charge a lower percentage. And there's always that thought of, well, if I just lowered my price and I beat everyone on percentage, I could theoretically get every deal, right? I can have the biggest book of business, the biggest client roster, right? And then instead of working with 10 clients at once, I can work with 100 clients at once, right? If I lowered my price, right? And that might sound appealing for some, but it also kind of, goes in the face of, well, what is your own self-worth? What is your own value? How should I be pricing my services? Should I be the lowest price forever and always? Or should I recognize that, oh, well, I have great reviews, testimonials. I know what I'm doing. I'm now experienced. I've done deals. I can command a higher percentage and a higher price, right? So with where I'm at in my career now, I'm probably somewhere in the middle. I'm not the most expensive. I'm not the cheapest either. And if, I've definitely turned down a few clients recently just wanting me to match someone else's rate. And I kind of taken a stance of, I would much rather pass on an opportunity at a much lower rate and focus on clients that value me enough to pay the rate that I quote them so that I can constantly deliver a higher quality of service for those people that do want to work with me.
How does an entrepreneur decide? So let's say an entrepreneur is looking to sell their business, right? It could be cannabis business, but you name it, kind of any business. And you say, look, where should the line be between choosing a better banker, but at a higher price versus the worst banker at a lower price? And presumably, the reason being presumably the better bankers can be look, we charge more, but I'm going to get you a higher price, right? So better banker because they're better at their job, faster, deals can get done faster, higher chance of getting completed at a higher price. Yes, they will charge you more. What is the line? How does someone choose? This is actually something I've always been curious about. I've been through this a little bit myself before, but how do you decide, right? How do you really choose? You're I don't know, how do I know that David's really going to get me a better price than Joe Schmo, who's a little bit cheaper? They both say that, and I can pay Joe Schmo only 5% instead of paying David 8%. what is the line there, and how does an entrepreneur make that decision? Because sure, a bigger pie is theoretically better, but not if you're paying a significant amount more of that. The net is the same.
Putting my sales hat on, right? If I was pitching you, I would definitely say, hey, well, we charge a higher percentage, because we're going to get you the higher valuation. We're going to get you a better offer. We have better connections, more experience, and we're just going to get you a higher offer. That's how we justify our price. I also think everyone says this. Every banker says this. I don't think there's a banker that has a successful sales pitch that says, oh, we're going to get you the highest price, but we're going to charge you the lowest amount. That just doesn't make any sense to me, right? If you think, if you're the best banker or the guy that's going to get this client the highest price, you're going to charge the highest percentage because you are directly incentivized, right? Higher percentage, higher dollar value, higher deal, right? I would say in my experience, first of all, I by no means am the best banker in my space. I don't think I have the highest level of access. I have been busting my ass, and I pride myself on being one of the most connected guys in any room that I walk into. And I know I have the relationships, and I'm confident about the relationships. And that's a big fucking part of it, because if I'm an agent and I'm representing a company to a group of buyers and I'm running a formal process, the banker has to be one of the most confident guys in the room, right? He's got to know his numbers. He's got to know his client's positioning. He's got to know his client's goals as well as their intrinsic value. And he's got to be able to tell the story and sell the goddamn deal. However, I now have been, very well networked, and I know a lot of other bankers and advisors. There isn't a direct correlation usually between, higher percentage banker, better deal value, right? That's not true 100% of the time. At the end of the day, there's a lot of emotion that goes into deal making, and emotion is what really dictates price. And what I would tell a prospective client, especially when they're looking and trying to identify the best advisor for them, go based on your gut instinct. Don't always go based on the most expensive guy or the cheapest guy. Go based on your gut instinct in terms of what you think that individual is going to be able to do for you. Do your diligence on your advisor just as your advisor is doing diligence on you. Check for past deals. Ask for references. I don't always like being asked for references, but clients do it all the time, right? And if you've had successes, you should have no problem in giving those references, right? And go with whoever you're most confident in, even if it's 1 percentage point higher in commission. If you have a higher degree of conviction that this particular advisor is going to do a bang up job and is going to get the deal done in the fastest way possible, go with it.
Yeah, that's actually so great answer. And it kind of relieves some of my concerns sometimes. It's like, how do you really know? But you're right. Like, do your diligence, figure out ask for all the right questions, and then go with the person you feel is can do the right job for you and get to you the most. And probably part of that comes down to even the individual. It's like, hey, look, there might be a banker who has amazing references, all these things, but maybe they're overwhelmed with new deals that they have right now and they can't give you the focus that you deserve, or they're having life problems and they might have had great past success but are in a bad personal place. Who knows? But yeah, it's a great way of putting it. So then going back to really good success as an entrepreneur overall, you were talking about people. So I want to go back to the people part. Like, what is the people part of the two key things being, once again, like storytelling and people? People meaning what? What does people mean for the best entrepreneurs you've seen?
What people means to me for the best entrepreneurs is mostly around building teams and surrounding yourself with amazing people that believe in your vision, believe in your motivation, and actually want to be there on the ride with you, right? They're willing to, sacrifice blood, sweat, and tears in accomplishing mutual objectives and goals, right? People is something that I'm actually constantly trying to work on. You have to be good with people. And my biggest struggle is delegation, right? And the biggest, key to success that I've seen in many of my clients is they're really good delegators, right? They're not, a one-trick pony. They don't do everything. They identify people that fill weaknesses, right? They know what they're good at, and they also know what they're not good at. And instead of trying to be a one-stop shop and doing everything themselves, they're successfully able to surround themselves and bring in folks that are just very complementary to them with very complementary skill sets and people that they would instill trust in getting the job done in areas maybe that they're weaker in, right? So for example, in software, right? If you're a CTO and you're the technical guy and you're the coder and you're getting into the weeds, you're probably not the best fundraiser or salesman, right? If your skill set is purely technical. So a smart technical founder would maybe go out and find a non-technical co-founder or someone to come in and actually help them on the soft skills, right? The fundraising, the sales, the marketing, the schmoozing, right? I see this so often with my cannabis clients is the most successful ones build rock star teams. And I yes, I use the phrase rock star. You don't have to surround yourselves with rock stars, but the most successful entrepreneurs that I see really know how to build teams. They really know how to find, identify, and motivate and consistently motivate people to walk and run to achieve a common goal, right? We're all out here trying to build a company. We're all here trying to achieve our next milestone. You got to really be able to retain, attract, and, surround yourself with great talent.
How are there any skill sets you think they've had that enable them to do that? Have they learned it? Or they just happen to be good at building that team and like getting people really bought into that vision? Like, what are there certain qualities that enable them?
Yeah, I think it's all over the board. I've met a lot of people that are just really good people skills, just like really good with people. They can motivate people. They're like soft skills are excellent. Some of them come from military backgrounds. Some of them, have learned to be good with people with the various jobs that they've worked at prior to their entrepreneurial endeavors. Other people learn at it, right? Like not all managers out there are great managers on day one, right? There was times where I had never worked with anyone before, right? I was a lone ranger and I never delegated a project. I never had a partner, right? It's all about experience and it's all about, getting in the weeds and actually, working with people and figuring out how to delegate tasks, how to communicate properly. It's literally the most basic shit to think about, but proper communication, good written and oral skills, the ability to listen, the ability to delegate. All of these skills are so paramount in making great leaders because they're all very, very important skill set in the CEOs and entrepreneurs of tomorrow. It's like you can have the most brilliant idea, you can code, you can do an MVP product yourself, but you're never gonna really scale and really become a very big company if you can't surround yourself with people and you can't delegate tasks. And there's been a lot of examples through my time of just people that are born with it or people that learn it.
Are they are for those people, are they being motivated by mission, by vision, by money? What is motivating the people on those teams to be as good as?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is multifaceted. There's a lot of people that are motivated purely by money and purely by financial outcome, and I'm definitely one of them, right? But there's a lot of people that are just motivated by other things, right? They're really passionate about an industry. They're really passionate about a problem. They're really passionate about solving something. And whether they're the CEO or they're just a rung on the totem pole, there's a lot of people that believe in the greater good and a bigger mission and something bigger than themselves. And, whether it's someone who was early at Facebook or Twitter or, any big successful tech company, I've just come across so many people that are not founders that, when they speak, I think they're founders of their companies, but I learned they're just a member of the team. Like the passion comes out. They just exude passion. You don't always have to be an entrepreneur to buy into a vision and to be really passionate about what you do every single day. So I think the answer is multi-pronged. There's some people that are purely motivated by money, but I think there's a broader subset of humans that need way more than the dollar figure in order to be motivated to wake up every day and put blood, sweat, and tears into something. And a lot of that has to do with passion.
What do you think it is with the most successful founders you've worked with? What are they driven by? Going back to sort of success, is it the money side? Question number one is, what are they driven by? But question number two is, how many of them are multi-time founders versus first-time founders? And if they're a multi-time founder, what is driving them to keep taking another bite at the apple, especially if they've had some level of financial success? They don't necessarily need more money, but maybe that's still what's driving them. Like, what is it?
Yeah, I've worked with a lot of serial entrepreneurs, but actually a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with are first-time entrepreneurs. And that's probably because I'm in the cannabis space and it's a very new market and there's not a lot of there's not a lot of successes of people that have launched, scaled, sold a cannabis company and then have already done that again twice because the market's so new. So a lot of companies that I and founders that I work with are first time founders, and to be quite honest with you, a lot of them are motivated by money. A lot of them want to achieve financial success. They want to achieve it for themselves. They want to achieve it for their families. Most of them have come from very humble beginnings. And that's one of the things I love about working with cannabis is these aren't, trust fund babies. These aren't successful people. A lot of the folks that I work with, this is their first company. This is their first business. This is their first venture into the business world. and they're figuring it out as they go along. So yes, they're motivated by money, but they're not motivated by money like someone who has already had a taste for it in the past. They're motivated by financial success because they want to take care of their families. They want to take care of their employees and their families, right? They want to build something where nothing existed prior. And that's the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship is we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different socioeconomic statuses. And I've just had the benefit of working with so many people that have literally come from nothing and have made something. And those clients are the best to work with. And it puts a smile on my face when I could realize a successful outcome for someone when it's their first big financial win in their entire lives. Some people have never even seen $1 million before or even know what that looks like. And I've worked with a few companies now where it's been their first actual major milestone. And it's just such an amazing feeling.
For any entrepreneur to have that exit, knows me, you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into and have that outcome is amazing. Are there any differences in geography when it comes to either recruiting the right people, building the right business, things like that? Like, you're in LA, but maybe LA is a hotbed for the cannabis industry. I actually don't know, but like what? So like, is that why you're in LA or did you choose it for other reasons? And then also, once again, like for the cannabis industry, but maybe all entrepreneurs, what is the value of being in the right place geographically wise for recruiting the right team, those sorts of elements to success? When you think through your clients, right? You represent clients from all over the US. Are there hotbeds of success when it comes to the cannabis industry or just in general? Or is it, you can build great businesses anywhere?
That's a really interesting question. I think the answer to that question is really changing in front of our eyes and has a lot to do with remote work since COVID, right? Talent used to be concentrated, especially in tech, right? It used to be concentrated in cities like Silicon Valley, San Francisco, New York, LA, right? And you could say the same for consumer companies. You can even say the same thing for cannabis, companies in terms of a very concentrated area of entrepreneurs and movers and shakers and doers, right? I think a lot of that's changing, right? There is a lot to be said about, being in these quote unquote hubs, these big cities, whether you're a tech entrepreneur or cannabis entrepreneur or consumer. There's a lot of value in being a city like Los Angeles or SF or New York because things are happening here. Entrepreneurs are building companies. Networking events are taking place. Pitch days are taking place. The investors and, financiers are actually physically here, right? So if you're an entrepreneur or you're kind of, wanting to raise money or build a business, it helps just being in close proximity to other entrepreneurs and other, VCs and backers, right? Because you can meet up with people physically. You're closer. You can build closer relationships and you could, get to that next milestone much faster. So there is a lot to be said about being in big cities. My choice of being in Los Angeles had nothing to do with that. I literally moved from San Francisco because I wanted more sunshine.
Fair reason. I would argue it depends where in San Francisco you live. You can get good sunshine anyways, but I hear you. So, okay. So spending like being cognizant of time, actually we're getting close on time right now. Walk us through that a little bit more when you think through like you're going back to like where we started to some extent, like for that journey. If you look at yourself 5 or 10 or 15 years down to the future, what does that success look like? How is it once again sort of changed for you? Like maybe now happiness is a little bit more part of the picture, but like what is entrepreneurial excellence? When you write your epitaph or your gravestone or something, what are you going to want it to say on there? Like David Kram had an amazing house in the best cars. Like what is it going to be?
That's a really good question. And I have no idea what will be written or what will be written of me. But if you had to ask me today, it's, yes, there's a certain level of financial success that I want to get to, that every entrepreneur or founder wants to get to. But it's not about the number of cars or houses or millions of dollars in my bank account. It's what you can actually do with those funds. And I think the definition of what success means to me and kind of entrepreneurship excellence means to me is definitely changing. And it's kind of becoming more of, if I reach that level of success in my life, there's just so many more things that I can do to improve the disposition of those around me, right? Whether that's in extending that benefit to other budding entrepreneurs, whether that's launching a venture fund of my own, which is definitely a goal of mine one day, whether it's starting a nonprofit, right? I would say 10 years ago, it would be, I want 50 houses, 20 cars, and a private jet. And I'd be happy whether I was with someone or solo, and that would be the end all be all for me. And I would love to die in a private island somewhere, right? That would be my level of success. I think now that's absolutely changing. As I've gotten more successful, I really love now the people that I work with. And I really pride myself. I have great clients, and I haven't always had great clients, but I finally reached a point in my career where I can be picky and choosy about who I work with and who I take on. That's one of the biggest, things that I'm proud about in the last 2 years. I'm now at a place in my business where I can turn away business, and I can afford to turn away business. And that is an element of success. That's an element of happiness. And that's an element of what success looks like for me. It's not about reaching 20 million in net income, 50 million. It's not a particular number. I can now turn away clients. Holy shit. I've never been at this place in my, life before. It's going from there to being able to make my first full-time hire. It's about scaling a team. It's about providing for others, right? So 5 to 10 years from now, I have no idea what my life's going to look like financially, but I have a very high degree of conviction that I will absolutely be more successful. I hopefully would have built and helped countless entrepreneurs launch, fund, scale, and ultimately exit their businesses. Perhaps I will venture into other industries outside of cannabis. There's certainly a lot of changes afoot on the near-term horizon with cannabis that may or may not, benefit or hurt my particular business. But what I'm getting really good at is the art of the deal and being an advisor to entrepreneurs and helping them with raising capital, scaling enterprise value, and ultimately getting to a liquidity event. And I think those skill sets can be very transferable to any industry and to any part of the world. And if I constantly strive to be the best deal maker that I can be in the cannabis business, then the sky's the limit in terms of what I can do after that. And there's no doubt in my mind that I'm going to be successful as long as I excel in what I'm doing today.
Yeah. And maybe that's sort of the key thing is that so many people forget the idea that look, you just need to be good, be great at what you do. I don't care what it is almost you do. Be good at it. Stick with it long enough. You will get better and better and better. And that will start to build that reputation. When you start building that reputation, means you can charge more for the services that you provide. And then at some point you reach where you have a level of optionality, essentially, where you can say, I don't want to work with you. You're not someone I'm interested in working with. I don't think you're a good deal. I just don't care. And you can sort of say no. The ability to say no, though, is predicated on years of absolutely that. And that's what a lot of people forget. We live in this sort of TikTokization of the world where it's I want to get overnight success. And it's even the people who are stars on TikTok work pretty hard to get there. It takes time.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing that I would tell entrepreneurs is, everything in life takes time and there's no shortcut to success. There's a lot of people that, parade themselves on Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok about all this key success and buy my ebook and my e-course and subscribe to my newsletter. I'll teach you how to be a millionaire. That's mostly bullshit, right? Number one contributor to success is just putting in the work day in and day out and having a high level of conviction in yourself. Being the best at what you do. I don't care if you're a tech entrepreneur, a cannabis entrepreneur, a founder, a product manager, you sell lemonade at a lemonade stand. Be the best goddamn lemonade stand on your goddamn block. Just be good at it. Be great. And the more you do that and the more you have a mindset of just being great at what you do, the more success you're going to ultimately realize in life.
I 100% agree, which is actually kind of a perfect segue to my very last question, which maybe you've already answered, but I'll ask it again anyways, because it's part of what I ask every single person I talk to. If there's one singular piece of advice that you would give every entrepreneur to achieve excellence, what is that piece of advice? What do you if there's one thing you just have to do, the biggest takeaway from this entire call, what is it?
That's a great question. The number one thing I would say to entrepreneurs about achieving excellence is probably have a vision. Have a vision, fine-tune that vision, iterate on that vision, obsess over that vision, and everything else will figure itself out. Literally. Just obsess over what you're trying to do, iterate on it, pivot, talk to everyone, ask your friends, ask advisors. If you're trying to start a service business or a product business or a tech business, just obsess over it. Live and breathe what you're trying to do, and you can figure everything else out. But if you have that level of obsession, you undoubtedly will have that level of ambition to achieve that success. And I think that's the number one piece of advice I would absolutely give in terms of excellence.
So I love that. And I would actually, we have a few extra minutes. I would actually ask a follow-up to that because it's a really, really good point. Do you think people become obsessed by default? You're just like, I happen to love video games, therefore I'm obsessed. Or do you think they become obsessed because they work so hard at it to become something they love? Like how does obsession happen?
Yeah, I mean, I could only answer for myself, but I was not obsessed with what I do now when I first got into this. It was just a means to an end. It was a means to making rent. It was a means to making my next buck, right? I think when you put in so much time and energy and you have failures and you overcome obstacles and you hit roadblocks and you just spend more time doing what you're trying to do, you become obsessed with it.
No, I think that's exactly right. In exactly the right direction for where things go. But so David, to kind of finish things off, like, how do people find you? How do they get in touch if they want to learn more about your services or just learn about how to sell their own business? Just ask questions.
People can very, very easily find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. My name is David Kram. Easily reachable there. Also, my email, david@springleafcapital.com. I respond to literally everyone. I obviously can't help everyone, but I am an open book. I'm a resource, and I would love to hear from your audience if anyone's interested in figuring out how to sell their business or just has a random question about M&A.
Amazing. Well, David, thank you so much for being on the show. I sincerely appreciate it. I know I learned stuff today. I hope I'm lucky enough to have a business that I'll have to call you up and need M&A advisory.
You will soon.
Anything is possible. You got to just stick with it and lead to those next levels of excellence and success. But thank you so much for being on the show and your time. It's meaningful to me.
Thank you so much, Adam, for having me. Thank you so much.